Today, I thought I could talk about shame. And shame's something I've been kind of curious about the last week of just like wanting to understand on a deeper level what shame is or what really is the feeling of shame. And last weekend, I did a dance workshop where I kind of got some insight about, after like thinking about it, like literally 2 days prior, of like, what really is shame? What does it mean when we experience shame? And then like 2 days later, I'm doing this dance workshop, and during one of the exercises, I get all of this information about shame, which I thought was pretty cool. But what you understand about shame is that oftentimes shame is really an energy of hiding, an energy of it's not safe for people to see some of the weirder parts of myself, to see some of the more wounded and damaged part of myself, or to hear about experiences where I was really harmed and traumatized. And when we're hiding those parts of ourselves or trying to keep those parts in a cage that we don't look at or we pretend never happened to us, and we never talk about that with other people too, it's essentially like relating to our wounds and our trauma like we're a scared child that doesn't want to look at the monster in the closet. And whenever we're relating to our pain like that, it's essentially giving the how you avoid your pain is how you give your power away to your pain. And it actually is what then makes us into more monstrous, unconscious, or even addicted versions of ourselves, because when how we avoid our pain then gives that pain, it one traps the pain within us from it really being seen, heard, validated. And as you see and hear your pain, that's what it takes. That's one of the first steps in order to integrate that pain, or to allow that pain to start to be released, and help that pain remember a little bit more of its innocence, because our innocence only holds on to pain for how identified it is to pain. And when that innocence doesn't feel honored or acknowledged for the pain it survived and endured, it holds on to that pain with a tight grip. And until we start to honor the pain we've been through, and turn that painful story into something that is beautiful. And when we turn it into something that pain into something that is beautiful, whether that's art, whether that's poetry, whether that's just about sharing our experience with others, it actually is what allows our innocence to let go of its identification of pain, because the innocence child within you goes, okay, now they're hearing my experience. Now they're really seeing me, and they're willing to acknowledge this pain and use it as a way of spreading greater good or greater positivity by willing to share their story, so others don't fall for the same mistakes, or others maybe are inspired to make different choices than how I chose, or at least to be more aware of what might be a dangerous environment for me, or even just the idea of just sharing the story helps others start to see the commonality of all our pain. And so when we can do that is when our innocence let goes of its attachment to its pain, and allows that pain to start to be healed and transformed. And vulnerability with ourselves and vulnerability with others is really the greatest way to free yourself from any hiding tendencies. And I would say your tendencies of hiding is your shame. Your shame always is a voice of I'm too weird, I'm too wounded, I'm too awkward or ugly for other people to really see me. And if we continue to not share our weird, more ugly, more even just to talk about some of the addictions we've been through in our past, it's what keeps that pain within us of shame in a cage. And it's when the caged animal, when we avoid it, is actually when we become is when we start to relate to life from the same way we try and control our pain is then the same way we try and control our life. And it's the same way that we then, and when we avoid something, we're essentially saying it's too scary, too powerful, too ugly for me to look at. But that's when those parts are able to take us over, because we're now relating to those parts as a child scared of its darkness, rather than the adult that is able to see and love us through the darkness we're experiencing. And darkness can only have power over you when you avoid it, or when you're unreally willing to look at some of the darker tendencies you might have, because avoidance is always relating to something unconsciously. And when you're avoiding something, you're aligning yourself with unconsciousness, which then gives that unconscious part greater influence over you. And so recognizing, if I want to heal my shame, I have to stop avoiding how I feed my shameful patterns by hiding, how avoid vulnerability, or avoid how I don't always feel the best with my close friends or family, and I never talk about that with anyone, because I'm scared that if people really saw me, they wouldn't love and accept me. Right. And that's usually a way of us giving our power away to how others perceive us. And we say that if someone rejects me, if I open up and they go, ooh, too much, right? Then that says something about me. And that says that, and that's in truth, that says nothing about you. That says about that, what that says about is that own person's relationship with depth and vulnerability. And what you realize is, I can only have deep relationships with people that are willing to be deep. And if someone isn't willing to be deep or vulnerable, it's like the most it can be is like a surface level, or like a little bit like shallower friendship or a romantic relationship. And so depth really is discernment. And the people that go, oh, that's way too much, or oh, I don't want to know you now that you've told me about that, are the people who really aren't meant to be your friends, or meant to be your partner anyways. And so when we listen to our shame and try and hide our pain, is actually what prevents us from having greater discernment in our life, by being vulnerable, because vulnerability will tell you right away who's meant to be deeper with you in relationship, and who's meant to be a surface level relationship. Because because every person on this planet, no matter how dark their past is, has people that would be willing to still love them, even with the darkness they've survived, the addictions they've gone through. And it's often people who've gone through similar addictions or similar wounds. And when we stop hiding our shame and start really talking about our experiences, is when we start to see that there's so much commonality between the things we've survived and other people have survived. And that's when we start to find deeper connection, and even deeper sense of community. And so shame in some ways really is what's blocking us from being discerning about who is going to be right for us for deeper relationships. And I'd even say it blocks you from deeper connections in your life when we are trying to hide. And during this workshop, I had the realization that my fear of rejection is what tries to protect my shame. And so I don't put myself out there, because I'm afraid of being rejected, because I think still on some level that if someone rejects me, that says something about who I am, or that affirms how unlovable or unacceptable I feel, because I definitely do feel that at times still, even being someone that talks about self-love a lot, and recognizing that that's just feeding my own insecurities when I try and hide. And really it's getting comfortable with rejection that helps us feel safe to be our more weird, true, authentic, and expressive selves, and to stop and to hide less. And that's actually when we are going to embody an energy of vulnerability, of expression, that's actually going to attract more deeper relationships to us is when we're willing to stop hiding and when we're willing to stop listening to, oh, I don't want to put myself out there because I'm afraid of being rejected. But it's like you're only going to find the right people in your life that really are going to be able to fully love you when you start to put yourself out there more. And you're only lost in amount of shame for how little you put yourself out there and how much you're aligned with hiding. And what you recognize when you're in pain is you, like if you're in emotional pain or you're going through a day that feels a little bit more heavy, is like those usually are the days where you want to curl up in a ball, where you don't want to put, when you don't want to like you don't want to put yourself out there anymore. Like I'd experienced 2 days ago. I was walking on the beach. I was feeling like a little heavy and wounded. And this dog comes up and petting me and asks for pets, and I'm petting it. And I'm like in a wounded place, and I'm not wanting to talk to the owner because of fear of maybe they don't want to talk. And then I would be feeling heavy and feeling rejected by these people. And that felt like too much. And so it's safer for me to hide. But in truth, I probably would have felt better if I had put myself out there and talked to the people and made a little bit of a deeper connection to that day, and recognizing that our hidingness is actually what keeps our heaviness trapped within us. And so if we really want to be free from our pain, we have to stop hiding. And it's something I'm very much still working through, just like anyone else. And I definitely have a pretty strong tendency of hiding and not really sharing what it's like to be Luke sometimes. And so that's something I've been really working on lately, is like, can I be more vulnerable? And because that's only that's gonna help you find your way out of your control patterns, and it's gonna help you meet the moments how the moments need to be met, not trying to constantly control situations to be so that it's the perfect situation and you're your perfect self to meet that situation, because that isn't reality. And oftentimes the moments are perfect are the ones that are least planned. And if we really want to experience greater perfection in our life, we have to be willing to let go of our own perfection tendencies and have to let go of our own hiding tendencies and start to go, can I just be more of myself? Can I just be more of myself and even embrace my more imperfect parts of myself? Because that's how people are really going to see who you are. And that's how people are really going to start to recognize, oh, this person embodies a safety, a vulnerability, a love that I would really like to get closer with. But people aren't going to be able to see that if you never let people see you. And I kind of want to transition, I think oftentimes working with shame, or people saying like they want to feel more wild or untamed, that there's often a tendency when people think about stuff like that, or like wanting to move in a direction of that, is like, oh, let me feed more of my mental fantasies. But oftentimes our fantasies in our mind are fantasies over seeking and pleasure, and kind of ignoring the well-being of our body, or ignoring what would actually be healthy boundaries for us. And our mind makes it sound like it's an awesome idea, and then when we go through the experience, we go, didn't really feel as good as I thought it was going to feel, and now I feel a lot of shame and guilt in myself after experiencing that. And we feel the shame and guilt because it's our innocence saying, hey, you really weren't honoring your body in that. You weren't really making choices that were aligned with healthy boundaries. You weren't really making choices that were like where you made sure that this person was a good person to share that much vulnerability and intimacy with, and you kind of just rushed into something trying to feed a mental fantasy you had while ignoring how it was going to make you feel on the other side of it, and recognizing that feeding my fantasies is not going to free you from shame and guilt. And maybe it will help you be a little bit more wild, but it's more of like an unconscious wild of, I don't really look for red flags and I kind of just throw myself at people trying to feed my cravings for pleasure while ignoring like actually having good boundaries and taking the steps I would need to take to make sure my innocence isn't going to feel heartbroken on the other side, or isn't going to be forming attachment to people who really, or giving people pieces of my heart that really aren't capable of holding those pieces of my heart, or might squeeze those pieces a little too tightly, and then I feel more wounded and damaged on the other side. And so freeing yourself of shame and guilt is not feeding your fantasies. What helps us be more wild and untamed is when we feel more safe and secure and more healed within ourselves. And we do that by having good boundaries and by willing to be more vulnerable with people about the experiences we've had. And when people can show that they can handle vulnerability, and when we take things slowly, is actually when we start to see, okay, this is some red flags that I don't want to share greater levels of connection with this person, or greater levels of attachment, or be in more vulnerable situations with this person. Or we see, wow, this person is continuing to meet me on deeper and deeper levels, and this would actually be a good person for me to share greater depth, greater intimacy, greater vulnerability and connection with. And you can only see that when you move slowly, and no amount of feeding your fantasies, right? When you're feeding your fantasies, you're really just feeding your unconscious patterns of seeking pleasure and ignoring the well-being of your heart, which is actually feeding your patterns of shame and guilt. And if you recognize when you play out fantasies with people that you haven't done your due diligence on, or haven't really made sure they're a safe person to connect with in that way, oftentimes you feel greater shame and guilt on the other side of that experience, because it's feeding the parts of yourself that are wounded, that think that me sharing physical intimacy with someone is going to give you greater value and worth, but it's really just feeding the part of you that's unworthy to have good boundaries in your life. And so if we really want to be more wild and untamed, and feel more sovereign in our experience, it's actually about mastering our unconscious desires and cravings, and finding healthy outlets, whether that's meeting our own needs in our body, or finding some way to express those feelings in art, and nothing is too dark to write a poem about, or to paint, or even draw about. But when we're unwilling to feed those parts is when those parts integrate, and we find we actually have a lot less unconscious cravings and desires, and we start to actually crave greater boundaries and greater safety within ourselves, because we're remembering our safety by how we started to honor good boundaries in our life. And that's really what's going to give you the safety to be more wild and untamed. It isn't feeding your fantasies. And one more thing I would like to just kind of hit on is shame. Is like, sometimes we have a tendency of, right, when I don't want to be vulnerable, or when I'm hiding from my pain, is that I'm in relationships, or I'm in a career that really feels like it's sucking more life from me, or maybe it feels like some parts of it feel really good, and then other parts feel like really draining, or it's creating a lot of drama in my life, or the person doesn't always feel like they're really, if we're in a relationship, maybe the person really doesn't always feel like they're able to meet me how I want to be met. And sometimes I end up hanging out with this person, feeling a little bit more wounded, a little less supported than I should. And when we're unwilling to listen to the truth of our heart, or unwilling to be vulnerable with ourselves, is a tendency of, I try and make the outside look beautiful, of I find a partner, I'm in a good paying job, and I secretly feel miserable on the inside, but I never talk about that with anyone, because I don't want people to really know how I'm actually doing. Or I don't, like, oftentimes we're fed ideas from our parents of, this is the career you need to get, that you need to have a child, you need to have a partner and have children, so that way our parents are happy. And we try and do that for them, and then we're in that career and we're in the relationship, who we go, this person is someone I could have kids with, we're secretly not really feeling like it's in alignment for us, but we don't want to acknowledge that because we're trying to our parents happy, or trying to make the ideas that we were fed as children growing up, we were attached to those ideas, and we say these have to be true to me. They can't not be true, because then I really don't have direction or purpose in my life. And so then we hide from our misery and try and pretend like we're in the greatest relationship ever, or try and pretend like our career is amazing, when really it actually feels in some ways like we really dread spending time with our partner, really dread sometimes going to our job. And a little dread is okay, but it's also something to acknowledge of, maybe this really isn't the long-term solution for my life that I had hoped for. And career is a little bit tricky because we all need to make money. But I think the thing with career is recognizing, if this really sometimes feels soul sucking, or there's parts of this job that I really hate, right? I don't need to settle for that. And can I become curious of, maybe there's a better job out there for me, and it doesn't mean I need to quit my job tomorrow, but can I slowly work towards, or slowly start to think about, there's a job that's going to bring me greater fulfillment, and I can find that job. And if I'm willing to take the action steps of looking for that job and building a different career, or going back to school, or doing whatever I need to do in order to move in that direction, as long as I take the steps, I will get there. And this doesn't have to be the end point of my life. And really, when we're feeling miserable, it's a call for greater redirection of, I'm probably in the wrong relationship with whoever I'm romantic with, and I'm probably in a career that's meant to be a short-term solution of income and not my long-term end goal. And when we are willing to listen to our feelings of misery and using it as a call for greater action, is actually when we're stepping more into our true self and really honoring the vulnerability of our heart, and not ignoring the vulnerability of our heart and trying to make our outside life look beautiful, and telling everyone that we're great and happy and that we're in the best life ever, when secretly we go, I hate this life and I don't feel happy at all, and I'm trying to pretend like things are okay so people don't have to see how really not okay I feel. And that's always an idea we're often fed growing up, of these ideas are what fulfill you. And then we go into adulthood and we realize, oh, these ideas that I was fed of this career, having a partner, don't fulfill me, because I have to make sure they're actually in alignment with how I'd like to grow, or how I'd like to actually spend my time, or how I'd actually like to feel loved, or how I'd actually like to feel connected with. And if it feels out of alignment, it's because it's out of alignment. And if I feel miserable spending time with my partner sometimes, or in my job, it's a sign of, I'm going to need to eventually change this most of the time. And with career and relationships, it's going to look a little different. Like relationships, we really, most of the time, can end things pretty quickly and just be like, it'd probably be better for me to be single and learn how to fully meet myself and learn more about myself before I'm giving my power away to a relationship that doesn't always feel like it's helping me be myself, or being a better version of myself every day. And when we can listen to that vulnerability of our heart, is when we start to really get to know who we are on a deeper level. So I hope that helps. Thank you for listening. Hope you have a great day. Bye.